An elderly woman discovers an incredible sight on a wintry night while looking for her runaway pet. It's unavoidable to become older. Although it can appear like a far-off destination to some of us, the goal will arrive eventually. While some people are fortunate enough to spend their senior years with a companion, others, like Fran Swayze, must deal with living in an assisted living facility with her cat, Bandit. After Fran pulled him from a shelter, the two were devoted to each other until one evening when Fran saw that Bandit was acting strangely. He continued to meow at something on the other side as he sat near the front entrance. It was already after 9 o'clock at night when Fran first didn't answer the door, thinking Bandit wanted to go for a stroll. Fran nevertheless caved in when Bandit continued to be loud. Bandit bolted outside as soon as she opened the door and vanished into the darkness. Fran went after it, searching frantically for her pet. She had no idea that when she cried out for Bandit that cold winter night, she would be met with an incredible sight. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Through the gaps in the slats, sunlight streamed inside. Fran no longer finds it difficult to get up in the morning. She wakes up without having to wipe the sleep from her eyes. Not only are her dreams lost, but they are entirely removed from her consciousness. Fran pulled her feet off the bed and into her slippers, which were at her bedside. Eager to start her day, Fran experienced grief in stages following the death of her spouse. It depleted her a lot at first, acceptance followed by denial. For a long while, she was unable to fall asleep in her bed. She didn't want to get out of bed throughout her recuperation, but she has already moved on. She has come to terms with the loss by learning to go on with her life. After all, it is what her husband would have wanted for her. The senior community at Buena Vista. When Fran began referring to this area as home, she was unaware of it. Although the first few years were challenging, she eventually gained independence. She even started to enjoy her stay here and made friends with a few people. When Bandit entered her life, everything were simpler. Her cat, Bandit, was saved somewhere in the summer of the previous year. Fran had considered acquiring a pet. She was aware that having a friend would help her feel better since her thoughts would be occupied. It is not always easy to be on her alone. Even if after losing her spouse she had come to terms with living alone, she had to adjust to sleeping in an empty bed for years. She reasoned that having a pet would benefit her. Adopting animals rather than purchasing them from supermarkets was something she really believed in. The finest thing someone can do for a homeless animal is to provide them a place to live. All they need is love and care. Fran made the decision to go see and explore a nearby shelter. She didn't go into it with anything specific in mind. She was aware that she would recognize it as hers as soon as she saw it. Fran entered the refuge as agreed upon, having no expectations. She started to examine the many breeds of dogs, cats, and even bunnies housed in some of the cages. Fran realized she was too old for a puppy since dogs require a lot of care and have insane energy, which she wouldn't be able to give as an older person residing in an assisted living facility. Fran was more of a cat person anyhow, so she figured having a cat would be simpler. She then started to browse the cat cages. There were many different kinds of cats, some little and fluffy, some groggy and aggressive. But Fran had not had the same sense of familiarity that she had thought she would when she saw her own. She was ready to turn around when she noticed a cage in the room's corner. Fran noticed the slender tabby cat cuddled up in her enclosure. She wasn't an attention seeker like other cats. She remained silent when Fran got closer to her cage. Fran found out that the cat had been in the shelter for more than a year, but no one had decided to adopt him when she asked about him. Fran realized that other than his slight coyness, there was no reason not to adopt him. Fran chose to bring the cat inside. Despite the fact that she had only recently met him, she sensed a connection with him. The cat was finally able to go home after more than a year in a cage, and the staff at the shelter was delighted to help. After the shelter finished giving him his immunization that evening, they delivered the cat to Fran's room. Fran made the decision to adopt her new cat and gave him the name Bandit. Bandit needed some time to adjust to his new home after living alone for over a year. He had never had the comfort of a warm bed, and Fran would frequently discover him dozing off on the floor in a corner. Fran gave Bandit time to become acclimated to her house, her touch, her affection, and everything. He wouldn't emerge from under the table in the early going. He wouldn't touch the cat food she brought him. He only found pleasure in some warm milk. Fran surmised that Bandit didn't know how to share his territory since he lived alone or had experienced some sort of trauma. Fran understood that it would take time for Bandit to feel at home in her house. When he did, at last, decide to come out from under the table, Fran let him to explore and become acquainted at his own leisure. And before she knew it, Bandit was starting to show signs of improvement. Bandit battled rodents and birds during the day, living the life of a feline ninja. But when night fell, he snuggled closer to Fran and insisted that she stroke him. Every night he slept in a cozy bed and ate the best cat food. At last, he was enjoying the life he truly deserved, that is, being loved and not kept in a cage. Plus, Bandit had become friendly with the neighbors, which brought Fran great joy. Though there was the usual competition between cats and dogs, Bandit and Sugar never got into a fight. Mary, her neighbor, owned a dachshund of her own named Sugar. Bandit, in between chasing rodents and birds all day, made time to stop by once. It was a Saturday night in the dead of winter. Bandit was busy licking his bowl clean as Fran finished up his food. Fran loved to finish her chores early so she could retire to bed and read in the warmth when the weather grew cooler. But even in the winter, Bandit loved being outside, so every evening after supper he would go for a stroll and return home after he had worn himself out. When he got home, he would curl up with Fran and drift off to sleep as she read her book and soon slept out too. Even though it was almost 9 o'clock at night, Bandit was not prepared for bed. He kept hovering near the entrance for some reason, and Bandit meowed as soon as the clock hit 9, taking a seat by the door. Fran was really perplexed by Bandit's strange actions. He loved the night, especially when Fran would curl up in bed with him in the cold. However, Bandit was not prepared to close the door tonight. He refused to move from his position even though Fran was calling him. Fran didn't want to send him out by himself because of his persistent meowing, but she also didn't want to send him out again because it was past 9. Fran caved in and opened the door when Bandit still hadn't gone to bed, but she wasn't willing to leave him outside by himself at this late hour. She made the decision to accompany him, and after he had spent a few minutes exploring, she would take him home. Fran got out of bed, put on her shoes, and prepared to go. Fran unlocked the front door and Bandit sprang out and fled the house. Fran was unable to maintain his speed and, before she realized it, Bandit had vanished into the darkness. Her brows knitted into a scowl, her legs giving way beneath her as if she didn't know where to seek for him. Fran started calling for Bandit, thinking that he would return when she spoke, but he was nowhere to be seen. Fran was unsure about who to ask for assistance. In the hopes that he might have spotted her cat roaming around someplace, she decided to go chat to the security officer. Fran saw something at the end of the hallway just as she was ready to turn around and head downstairs. It was so dark that Fran was unable to distinguish what it was. Reaching in closer, she saw a familiar, dull-furred tabby beast. It was the Bandit. With his back to the garden, he stood close to the railing in the hallway. Bandit turned to face Fran when she called to him, but he did not attempt to approach her. Fran was becoming perplexed by her cat's unusual behavior. She saw Bandit spin around and glance out the balcony once again. Fran cried out to her cat once again, and Bandit gave her a meow in return. He gave Fran a quick glance before turning to face the garden through the railing and starting to meow repeatedly. Fran knew Bandit was restless because he was staring at something in the garden. She chose to investigate it. Fran arrived to the location where Bandit was. She looked into the garden after him. Everything appeared normal at first. Then Fran detected something in the shadowy garden area. In the center of the garden was a heap of clothing. Fran stared closer, scowling in bewilderment, and her eyes widened to see that it was a body rather than a pile of garments. Fran hurried downstairs, having already called 911. She was unsure of the person or the circumstances, but she felt compelled to disclose this. She informed the operator that she was unsure of the condition of the person that was laying in the midst of the garden. She was reassured by the operator to stay still and that assistance was on its way. Fran saw someone she recognized as she drew closer to the body. It was Sugar, Mary's dog. Fran could only conclude that it meant Mary's body belonged to her. She hurried over to examine the dog's corpse. Yes, that was her neighbor. Fran stroked the dog's head while he moaned. The dog must be afraid, she knew. Fran reluctantly stretched out to feel Mary's pulse. Fran saw that Mary was not dead, but rather simply unconscious. Frank was, to put it mildly, relieved. In the distance, she could hear the ambulance coming. Holding Mary's hand, she sat with her and waited for assistance. Fran was relieved that Bandit had located Mary, even if she was unsure how he had heard her fall. As Fran waited for the ambulance to arrive, she heard Mary let out a little cry. Fran cast a glance down Mary's face. Her eyes were starting to open a little. She said, "Help me," with weakness. Fran begged her to wait, telling her that assistance was on its way. Fran drove Sugar back to her room as the ambulance transported Mary to the hospital. All she could do was hope Mary was well. She wouldn't find out anything until the next morning. Mary's daughter would phone from the assisted living facility and come to the hospital to spend the night with her mother. The hospital called Fran to let her know that Mary had survived the night and was well enough to return home. She had low blood sugar, which caused her to pass out and tumble. She would be released today, but because of her age, they had to keep her under surveillance for the night. Mary was thankfully not hurt in any way. She did fall, but she was uninjured and did not break any bones. The physicians informed her that Mary was extremely fortunate to have been discovered at the appropriate moment. Had Fran not located her promptly, Mary would not have survived. Fran was so proud of Bandit for being there for Mary when she needed him. Fran would never have gone outside and seen her in the garden if he hadn't fled the house that evening. She had no idea Bandit was so perceptive. It was incredible how Bandit acquired these emotions and senses to determine who needed assistance after being left in a cage for a whole year. Mary thanked Fran and Bandit for their assistance that evening when she got home. Mary expressed her gratitude to the cat for locating her on that cold night, saying that she would not have lived if he had not. She also expressed her gratitude to Fran for responding promptly and watching for her dog while she was away. Fran received a special thank you from Mary's daughter. She spoke about Fran's cat's outstanding qualities and how skillfully she had taught him. She made a joke about calling him Sir Bandit now, but Fran laughed it off, joking that she didn't want him to grow up to be a bigot. When Mary's daughter wrote about Bandit's heroic deed on Facebook, the post quickly gained popularity. His nicknames were Man's Best Friend and the Hero of Buena Vista. From all throughout the state, people were praising Bandit's intelligence and insight in their remarks. There was a lot of affection for the tabby cat in the post's comments. "Not a cat lover, but this one is a hero," a user said. "I wish you all the best of luck in life and eternal friendship, ladies. Bandit tick-ticks to kex-ticks." "I'm a big dog person, but Sir Bandit is a very special kid, I must say," said a different comment. It's safe to say that Bandit was bringing joy to all dog lovers. Mary mentioned to Fran that it's common to forget that cats have feelings for people as well. They all believe that cats are self-sufficient and don't care about other people, but Bandit has shown them all incorrect. He is undoubtedly a hero to Mary since he saved her life. Since then, Bandit and Mary have become close friends, and Bandit continues to see Mary every day. However, he is now buddies with Mary in addition to Sugar. The four of them spend a lot of time hanging out and taking walks in the garden, and Fran and Mary have become considerably closer as well. Since the day of the tragedy, Bandit has gained enormous notoriety among the people who live in Buena Vista. Friends welcome him everywhere he goes, petting and feeding him. Now that he is full, he returns home, and Fran doesn't have to worry about Bandit wandering the neighborhood late at night. Since it's also his home, she is aware that he is secure there. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.